What's going on, everybody? Aaron Guyette, Living.Fit's education director, also the master coach of battle ropes. But that's not what is important right now. What's important right now is who you have in front of you, and who we get to listen today is one of the most epic storytellers in the fitness industry. I remember I first watched Martin Rooney when he was at Perform Better, and he got me so pumped up, so motivated, so inspired that it carried me to all the way to the next year when I saw him speak again at Perform Better. And then I have had the incredible pleasure, the great honor to actually become his friend and have him come to the gym that I used to own and speak and inspire the people that came there. So before I get too excited and too titillated, let's get into it. Martin Rooney, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Aaron, it is my pleasure. You know that. And thanks for setting the bar so low.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so now, not only do we have 30 minutes to inspire someone for the next year of their life, so I am going to choose my words very wisely and use them judiciously. So I am ready to rock. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, if there's anybody that I know that can exceed the bar that is set, it is you. So normally, because you are in the fitness industry, you're a powerhouse in the fitness industry. You've done a ton of things for a lot of different people and a lot of different levels. There's so much to unpack. So we'll just start with this. How in the heck did you get into a little bit about, especially for anybody that may not have heard of Martin Rooney, like how did you get into the fitness industry? Where did that all start?
All right. Well, I'm gonna give it quick. And remember, everybody, what you're about to hear, it's all true, but it took me 30 years to do, or more than 30 years to do. So that's why it may sound like a lot. But I grew up in New Jersey, and my first coach, my best coach, was my mom. She was a physical education teacher and coach. She was the one that raised me from the start. You get 8 hours of sleep. You eat a good breakfast. Your meals should be balanced. Drink a lot of water. And ultimately, her big message was, hey, it's about working hard. It's about putting in effort. So before the book Mindset, I guess my mom already knew, how it was supposed to go. A coach found me in 7th grade, a track and field coach. He saw something in me, and for the next 5 years, he not only taught me everything he knew about track, but now I look back and I realize he taught me everything about what it meant to be a coach. And luckily for me, that led to a college scholarship. And then I went after that to the Medical University of South Carolina, got my master's degree in health sciences and my physical therapy degree. And in a weird twist of fate, then I made the U.S. bobsled team, represented the U.S. for a handful of years, and then became a physical therapist. But when I did, I learned a really important lesson, and everybody needs to hear it now. Don't do something you don't love. Don't spend your time trying to get better at something that's not your ultimate passion. And unfortunately, that's what I did for a handful of years until I couldn't take it anymore, and I had to get back into fitness. I had to get back into coaching. That led me to lots of courses in the mid to late 90s. I meet Bill Parisi on an airplane going to one of those courses in Texas. And then, man, I join him and we start rocking the Parisi Speed School, trying to get anybody to listen that would want to get stronger faster. And things started to take off. From one high school led to the New York Giants, led to 100 facilities across the nation, now over 1 million kids trained. And that gave me the opportunity, the platform to train pro athletes at every level, every sport, and in particular, UFC fighters. I was one of, if not the original guy to ever work with mixed martial artists in a physical capacity, starting in the late 90s with Renzo Gracie and his team. And that has led me all the way up till in 2 weeks, I'll be cornering Jim Miller, who hadn't had a UFC fight when I started with him. And this is going to be fight number 38, most fights in UFC history. We will be doing that in Las Vegas in a few weeks. And also along the way, I've had hundreds of Training for Warriors gyms in almost 30 countries around the world. And now I've just released in the last 2 months this book called Coach to Coach, which is all about coaching. This one called High 10, all about culture. And that leads me over that 30, 40-year journey right there, right to where we are right now.
Yeah, incredible. And you were able to say that in 3 minutes, that's pretty amazing because that is a ton of stuff. And Yeah, I mean that's why obviously everybody is seeing, just the inspiration and the motivation and the energy just oozing off of you. So I want to let's go from a high and we'll drop into the valley a little bit to kind of gain a little bit of perspective and get some context for. I think talking about coaching and culture is of the utmost importance, especially right now. So we were talking pre getting on this and starting to record. We were talking about, gyms that made it, gyms that didn't, and just this real struggle that a bunch of gyms have been going through. I have some experience with that, some stories of interactions with that. You have a ton of experience and stories of interaction with that. What has kind of been your take, your observation on what has transpired over the last couple of years, which I'm glad it actually allowed you to put some of this stuff on paper so that people can actually read it too, by the way.
Yeah. Well, hey, obviously for everybody listening, we're never going to sugarcoat it, but it has probably been in at least my 30 years in fitness, the most challenging time ever for the fitness industry. Many gyms around the world were mandatory closed, some in particular in my network for over a year. And hey, the ability to survive when you can't be open and landlords still want their money, it was one of the most trying and taxing times, not only for my network, but for my ability to lead and continue to allow what I tried to build over the last 22 years to continue to survive, right? And hey, the great news is not only did most survive, but many thrived during this experience. And that led me to write the book that I wrote about culture. Because if there's one thing that I saw, when people entered into this, Aaron, the businesses that had the greatest culture, AKA the greatest relationships with their people, the strongest relationships with whether you call them members, clients, whatever, going in, those were the ones that those students, members, clients, they did not allow them to fail. And that only revealed to me how important relationships are to our businesses if we forgot that, but also that culture, that interaction that we have with them is our most valuable commodity. And maybe I know I knew it, but I never knew it like it was revealed during this experience. And it only made it more apparent to me and made it easier for me to write about. And in this book, High 10, the great news is not only do I just write about how important it is, but I show everybody if they don't have a great culture, I give them a roadmap how to do it. And I think it's probably the most important thing that I ever wrote. It's been out for 3 weeks and people are going crazy about it right now. And man, I knew it was the right thing to do too, because hey, challenges are always going to continue to happen. And I'll tell you this about culture. Culture won't prevent the challenges, but it'll help you when you experience them. And that was a huge, huge lesson for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got some, near and dear brothers from the military that, because we established that culture, now when certain things are happening around the world and it's creating some tears and making some feels happen, the thing is, like, that's when they can connect and come together. That's when they're giving me a call, shooting me a text. So speaking of that, so during these shutdowns and things like that, what are some of the things that you saw? What were some of the silver linings, some of the bright spots where they could bridge that gap, even though they weren't necessarily allowed to have, the high 10, right?
Yeah.
Physically in the space, because they had that lockdown. What were some of the things that you saw? What were some of the things that where culture just came through in that process?
Well, the biggest way that culture came through for us, and it was really neat, is we created something we called our passport. Right. And what the passport was is everybody, remember when everybody moved online, everybody all of a sudden was offering Facebook Live classes, virtual classes, Zoom classes, anything. They were doing anything to still continue to get people to have some kind of interaction with them, whether they were still in their home while the coaches were in their gyms. And what was really neat, and this was a byproduct of our network and our great culture at Training for Warriors, we made this thing available and created this scheduling system where anybody that was a Training for Warriors member, they could go to any of the classes at any time when they were offered. It was a passport to go anywhere in the world.
Wow.
And I'll tell you what, I forget what the zenith was, because we're not really, we aren't really doing it anymore because most places are open again
Mm-hmm.
now. Some people are still using online. But I think there was something like we had like 40 classes a day offered, meaning throughout the day. So there was actually never a time you couldn't do one or take one. And it actually heightened the experience for a lot of our people, because they'd say, wow, now I can go to Finland, or I can go to Australia, or I was just in this thing in Brooklyn today. And I'll tell you what, that was a big thing that allowed our owners to maintain their membership base and not lose. And I'll tell you what, like that was during those really dark times when everybody was mandatory closed. I would say without a doubt, moving to a new format and pivoting quickly like we did. This was all put together fast. Like I'm talking in a week, was very impressive. And that was indicative of our culture and our willingness not to fold and to keep going. Right. And that would be the best probably story that I have through the event.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, and that's a huge offering. I mean, essentially, they're getting even more for their membership price. The unfortunate side is obviously it's through screens or whatever, and screen fatigue I think now is a thing, like for a certain
Oh, yeah.
But there is the silver lining of that, and the bright spot. Like we get to talk, and I would much rather be high tenning you over where you're at, or over here where we're at. But hey, we can still have these conversations. So talk to me a little bit, because you said 30 different countries, and I know just following you, and then being able to connect with you, like you are just always traveling somewhere at some time and doing just all sorts of things to get people pumped up, to get people inspired, to get people empowered, right? To build your culture and to do the thing that you do best, which is like just this high level coaching. So what does that look like now for you? How does that play out now? Obviously you can go live stream, but what's the travel like? What's going on at the home?
Well, I'll say this: the last 2 years, and if anybody's feeling my energy a little bit now, I'm the last guy you just bottle up and stick in his basement, right? And it was hard for me, hard on many levels. One, I like to train at our gym. I don't like to train in my house. I always had this kind of rule: I want to be out of my house. My house isn't for training. My gym is for that. But we moved everything indoors. I would say a silver lining in that, though, was because I was traveling over 150 days a year and almost every weekend on the road. It did give me a tremendous amount of time to really focus on my family and really take a step back and realize, wow, what I had been doing for almost 15 years straight. I was just so caught up in my routine that my kids were growing up, and this was a great opportunity to spend time and invest time in them. In particular, I'm wearing this hat. We just dropped my daughter off at Notre Dame, and she's going to be on the track team at Notre Dame. We did that on Sunday, and I'll tell you what, me getting to spend so much more time with her for the final 2 years of her high school, I know that had a greater impact than if I would have been gone. And so I tried to make the most of what we had. But throughout the experience, I did have the luxury. I was still cornering fighters at the UFC, and they were still flying guys out. It was very arduous with all the tests and how they did things. You were locked up in hotels, but at least I got to get out of my house occasionally to do that. But for all the presenting and everything I did, it all moved, again, same thing online. And like what we're doing now, is what I was doing all day long, every day, for either podcasts, webinars, seminars, universities. And I agree, I'll do it. But man, I loved that skin to skin and being in everybody's face. And I know people miss it because we're social beings, right?
Yeah.
Like we need to be around each other, but we also have to respect the health of everybody else too. And I got it.
Yeah.
But so definitely I would say I definitely dealt with some real challenges, not being able, essentially, if you're a presenter, speaker, and are in fitness, this was like the worst thing that could have happened
Exactly.
to you, and that's what it did. It took everything I loved away from me. But again, I'll say this, I also had more time to write. I feel like I wrote the best book I ever did. A lot of people are saying that in high 10. And maybe that's another piece of the silver lining, is that it gave me time to do something I would not have done if I was traveling. But so there is stuff on the horizon, like we talked about. I'm going to be in Seattle in a couple weeks. I'm going back out for the UFC, and there are events coming. But man, not like they used to be, not yet.
Yeah, yeah, not 150 days out of the year gone traveling. But the thing is, I know with you, you're intentional about your organization, you're intentional about coaching, you're intentional about culture, but you're intentional about marriage, you're intentional about your family. So it's not like those things weren't there before, but it is kind of a sweet thing to get that 2-year moment that you would have never have ordained, right? Because you're a speaker and a presenter and in the fitness industry. So of course you wouldn't choose that. But
yeah. I don't want anybody to get me wrong, like I was ignoring everybody. But here's what I would say, because you're in the same boat, man. It was like Grand Central Station here. So for everybody listening, I have 4 daughters, not just one.
Yeah.
All ages. They're all in different schools. So I have one in high school, one in college, one in middle school, one in elementary school, and when we are running from practice to practice, even when I was here, rarely were we all getting together. And in particular, we were never sitting down to a dinner together. And I'll tell you what, in the last 2 years, we pretty much haven't missed a dinner together. And I like it. It's the stuff that we talk about, and we removed the tech, and we dove back in. And even if the world opened up immediately and allowed me to do everything that I had done before, I wouldn't do it at the same pace. And I've made that decision just because not only I think would I miss them more, but at the same time, I don't want them not to get the best of me too. And hey, for everybody listening, if you find out more about me, whether it was, as Aaron knows, working with the Army Rangers and the Navy SEALs, Fortune 500 companies, top sports teams, all the way down to universities and everywhere else, if my kids fail because I had no time for them, then I'm a failure regardless of all those other things.
Yeah.
And that was a big wake-up call for me that, hey, I got to make sure they succeed too. And and I'm committed to that more than ever.
Yeah, I love that. For those that are listening, there's people that are glasses half empty, people that are glasses half full, and then there's Martin Rooney, who will figure out a way to get his sweat to fall into the glass so the glass is overflowing.
Completely, overflow.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so culture, coaching, the 2 books. I know obviously there's an entire book written on it, but what would be sort of the thesis of each one of those? And we'll just take them one at a time, whichever one you want to take first. What are we going to find if we open up the coaching book? What are we going to find if we open up the culture book? And I know, knowing you're going to put some really awesome handles on it so we can practically apply it immediately. But what's the essence in each one of those?
Well, here's the coolest part of it. And you know me, you already said I was a storyteller. You've been to my courses, and after them, everybody would always say, man, you need to write a book on coaching, man. You need to write a book on culture. That speech was amazing. And it never felt right. Like, I didn't want to do like a textbook, because coaching and culture are not if this, then that.
Yeah.
That's not how it works. And man, I had this epiphany. Everybody says, like you said, he's this storyteller. And I said, well, why don't I tell a story? Why don't I write a fictional story / parable, fable about coaching based off all the real stuff I experienced, and then put stories within the stories? And man, easier said than done, because I had never done that before. But I'll tell you what, I dug in, I did it, and each one of the books is a story. It's a prequel and a sequel. So Coach to Coach is this story of this young coach being mentored by an older coach, and then he's helping other people. And then High 10 is 30 years later, when the young coach is the old coach and what he's come back to teach and what he knows. But not only are they great stories, but there's over 30 stories within each of those stories. So it's a mind bender how much stuff is in there. So one way to describe it for everybody is, if Ken Blanchard, he was the guy that did like 1 Minute Manager, and Mitch Albom, who did like Tuesdays with Maurice, if their books had a book, baby, that would be those books. And
love it.
And that's, so it's very digestible for everybody. But here's the hook that you were talking about. The coaching book is all about to get you to not only understand what the word means to you, but to give you these guide points of just how to be better, how to do it. And the book is essentially all the mistakes I made in the 30 years of coaching so you don't make them, right? And after you understand that, and now your role and your responsibility as a coach, and ultimately how everybody deserves a great coach that believes in them, well then, once you understand what coaching means to you, well, now how do you coach for culture? How do you create a great environment for everybody to do that, so they'll take your lessons? And that was where then I started to really deep dive into culture. And I really realized, again, you've been to the courses. You've watched me take 40, 50 people that have never met before. And by the end of the weekend, they would run through a brick wall thinking for themselves, for that team that they're now on. Yeah. And that's what I really realized. No matter where I was working, in business, in sport, in my own home, I was really good at building this powerful culture. I was good at building a team. And that's when I started to dissect it, what it meant, and then I wrote about it. And again, High 10 is your guidebook or your roadmap, how to make that happen. And the most interesting part, maybe of both, is that people will put coach on the back of their shirt, but they don't even know what it means. And somebody else open a business and they never decided on the culture that they want. And then they're shocked when it doesn't go well. Right? And ultimately, these are my contribution or my gift back. So if somebody's going to call themselves a coach, hey, is my book the be all end all? No, but it needs to be on your shelf if you are a coach. And if you run a business, family, or team, you got to have High 10 too, or you're going to run the risk of really wishing or hoping it goes well instead of designing it.
Yeah.
And so can't be more proud of them. But they were a departure from my usual work. Remember, my books were exercise books, fitness books, and these I had to deep dive into the writing because I wrote them too. A lot of people ask me that. They're like, "This was great. Did you write that?" And I'm like, "Man," yeah, I wrote that. It's my name on the book, isn't it? But each one of them, they each took over a year to do, but they took 30 years to figure out all the information that's in there so that the people reading them don't make the 30 years of mistakes like I did.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And what a cool way for you to continue to pursue learning, right? Because now you have to learn how to tell a different style of narrative that has narratives inside of, has stories inside of that bigger overarching narrative. So I got a really cool story for you that you don't know that just happened. I just interviewed Cody McBroom yesterday. Right.
Okay.
And so Cody McBroom was a part of Luca Hocevar's, right?
Luca
Yeah. Vigor Ground. Cody McBroom is, creating this incredible online business or whatever. But so you said, the 30, I made mistakes for 30 years. And now I put, what I learned from those mistakes so that you don't have to learn them. Well, here's the thing. Cody McBroom is a perfect example of that exact thing happening. He took Luca's perspective, your perspective, and then some of the other guys like Charlie Weingroff and some other guys in the industry and absorbed from them. And basically he got put on the fast track. So he was able to do in 5.5, 6 years, what most of us, like you included, right? It takes 20 years, 30 years, right? So he just shrunk that all the way down, learned it all on the front end by actually listening, actually buying the book, actually reading the book, actually applying it, right? And because he's been to your summits, he's been to your talks, he's been to all, and so it was really cool to hear him basically learn of a guy that took the fast track by actually listening to the advice that these wise counsel like yourself, like Luca, right, were putting in front of him and I was just like, man, I'm a little bit jealous. I mean, granted, I'm very happy for the mistakes that I've made so that I could learn from them. I'm very happy in the moments where I got to learn from some of your mistakes so I didn't have to make those. But I was a little bit jealous. I was like, dang, man, this guy learned it so much faster. But really, like, that is for anybody who's listening, whether you're a coach or a trainer, or, you're just figuring out this whole fitness thing or whatever, like you can take these two books and actually have it mean something and begin to do that intentional thing as opposed to hoping that it happens right on the front end or on the back end, wishing you woulda, coulda, shoulda,
Yeah. Well, and a great way I always describe that, Aaron, is expensive versus inexpensive lessons. So for everybody listening, an expensive lesson is one where you either lose a lot of money, you lose a lot of time, you lose relationships, you lose your career. And I've made a lot of expensive mistakes and then I learn from them. Mm-hmm. But see, an inexpensive mistake is someone else makes it and you learn not to make it. And that's exactly what you're describing. So what's crazy is you can get both of my books on Amazon for like $40 total. and not make hundreds and hundreds or millions of dollars of mistakes and save yourself 20, 30 years. And I think that's a pretty wise trade.
Yeah.
So I am always looking for the inexpensive mistake. And that's what we all do, right?
Yeah.
But don't forget, the most important part of that story that you just told about, is, I call him Boom Boom, right?
Yeah,
Wasn't that it?
Cody,
like
Boom Boom McBroom. Yeah. Yep.
And the most important part, though, is if there are no coaches or there are no mentors, then none of that learning happens.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, everybody is a coach to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like everybody knows something a little more than somebody else can help them get down that path. And we have to accept that role and responsibility. So remember, the hero of the whole story was the coaches, right? So and if those are the coaches, see, I can't be jealous because I'm part of that path. So that was my job. I love it.
Exactly.
So know that's what we're doing, but also know, hey, minimize the expensive mistakes and try to maximize the inexpensive ones, and you'll grow way faster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always thought, like, what good is all this information up in my brain, right? If it just stays in my brain. And I mean, that's what I've loved about you going around and speaking. I mean, you've been sharing what's going on inside that head of yours for, decades now, right? Which is incredible because now, I can put it up into my brain, but then what good is it if it just stays there? I better, build my team and have my influence. And it's really cool. The spheres of influence just keep growing.
Yeah. And what you're describing, and this path is within the Coach to Coach book. Hey, when you're a young guy coming up or young girl coming up and at first, when you're a student, you got to be selfish. You're trying to get all the information for you. And you think, it's so funny because I watch this evolution of a coach and it's like, oh, I got to get everything for me and it's mine. And I can't let anybody else have it because that has value. Then it's, hey, and now I'm going to believe I invented stuff. So I invented this push-up or I invented this exercise, which you really didn't. Now you're getting creative. And then eventually things start to morph. And it's less about me, and it becomes more about we. And that's a culture, right? That's in the second book. But then as you get older, you start to realize you really grow when you share. See, I was good when I kept it to myself. I got great when I gave it all away.
Yeah.
And now, man, I'm getting older, man. And like the word you were just describing is legacy.
Yeah.
Like, what's my legacy going to be? That I learn tons of stuff and I go to my grave with it?
Yeah.
Or you learn tons of stuff and all these people, know something about it. And here was a great point. I went to Notre Dame to drop my daughter off. Well, you know what? I get a call in and I went and met with all the football strength coaches. They sat down and picked my brain for 3 hours, and they only knew of me because of videos they had seen me do 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And if I had never shared that stuff, I would have never got the opportunity to go in and share even more. And I can remember those things they were talking about was the first stuff I started sharing. And now, you know what? Man, am I glad I did.
Mm-hmm.
So remember a great line that everybody needs to know. When everybody shares, everybody wins, man.
Yeah.
Like if we all keep it to ourselves, like, I don't know, you might think you're stronger, but you're actually not.
Yeah.
And eventually it's going to go away. So how will you have left this place and with what? Like, I think the biggest question, and this is a question we ask a lot in one of my courses called Coaching Greatness. And I think it's the ultimate, right? Here's the ultimate question at the end. It's, what will I be remembered for? And you don't want to ask that one when you're 90 in your deathbed. You want to ask that one when you're 20, 30, 40, because if you know how and for what you want to be remembered, then you're going to do something great that day.
Absolutely.
To make sure that happens.
Yeah.
And really, I'm telling you, like, think about it. That's what a gravestone is. It's somebody's attempt to be remembered. But I think we can make much better attempts if we thought about it sooner.
Yeah.
And I never knew we were going to go that deep today, but that one was pretty deep.
No, well, I love it. Well, and that is then your purpose, right? And so to me, purpose gets super clear when the rubber meets the road, when there's friction, when there's difficulty like COVID and, all this stuff. It's like, well, what am I going to do? Am I going to quit that purpose? No, because this is my purpose. Like, this is my legacy. This is what I'm leaving. So now I'm going to get creative and I'm going to, create something like Passport and, or I'm going to write this book and all that stuff. So no, I think I love going that deep.
A line I used a lot for that, and this is a biggie. You ready for a Martin Rooneyism? I got a lot of those. Crisis creates clarity.
100%.
And watch this one. And clarity is power. So the whole thing is, it's got to be crisis. It's got to be stress. And then you become very clear. Like you said, that gave me a breakthrough. It's like, holy cow, all this is happening. What is my purpose? See, if my purpose wasn't to continue to keep my company going because I know what it does and how it helps people, or that my real passion wasn't fitness, I would have folded. Mm-hmm. But see, instead, I leaned in even harder, right? Yeah. Like I didn't lighten up. I tightened up, baby. Yeah. And it was like, and then because I had that clarity, I had strength. I attacked more and stayed more focused. And that's where the books came from. And like you said, the passport and everything else. Yeah, yeah. And again, and I'm not saying that to impress everybody listening, but to impress a challenge upon you.
No, absolutely.
What did you become clear about, right? Like what is your purpose? You didn't figure that out yet, then man, you're not going to be great. But if you do, and you were getting these inklings of it during this whole thing, then man, chase it, do something about it, you know? And, yeah, it's what I told my kid when I dropped her off. I said, don't chase a GPA. Don't chase a resume. Chase a passion. Yeah. Chase a calling, because that's the thing 30 years from now you're going to be doing. And I'm not going to be worried about what grade you got in like biology 1. Yeah. You know, so
I love that, because that story arc is now full circle into the first thing that you said, which is don't do something you don't love. And so I think this is a perfect time. I mean, that bow is wrapped. This thing is beautiful, but this is a question that we ask every single one of our guests. And I mean, I'm sure everybody's hanging on the edge of their seat to hear this response from you. And that is, what is Living Fit? What is Living Fit to you? What is Living Fit to Martin Rooney? And not Living Fit, the brand, but you know, this concept, this idea of Living Fit.
Well, and I'll tell you, going full circle again to where I started, it started with my mom. I think she was the one that gave me the initial idea of Living Fit. And it's interesting because as I'm thinking of it, and I already know, and I haven't even formulated it completely in my head, but I already know that it's most of the world isn't living fit according to this definition. And here's what I would say. You wake up, right? And when you wake up from 8.5 hours of sleep. Not even 8.5. That's what I found for myself. I need like 8.25 when I've studied myself. So 8.5, right? I wake up, what's Living Fit? First thing I do, big glass of water. Why? Because I've become dehydrated in the evening and I want to get everything going. And then, you know what I'm going to do to live fit? I'm going to feed, the next thing I'm going to feed is my brain. And man, I get up every morning and I read, right? And I'm either reading, whether you want to, it's my form of meditation. I'm either reading, journaling, writing. And then at some point, I'm usually best at about 1 p.m. That's my like optimal circadian rhythm. Then I train hard. And it's either going to be some form of strength training, resistance training, or some type of metabolic work. But as I get older, it's more resistance work than it is the metabolic. That's just how it's been going. And then if I were to live fit, then the last piece that has to happen in that day is the relationships with my either family or my closest friends, where at some point I'm going to ask them questions. I'm going to spend time with each one of them and put them to sleep by saying, I love you. And those were not, every one of those, I have been doing those for a very long time, but I know not all of those are easy. Those are all my habits now. But those, I think that just in my head, that is what fitness means. It's kind of body, mind, and spirit. They all happen through that. Mm-hmm. And and actually what I just described, and remember the work all also happened in there, and the commutes and the cars. Yeah. But if those things all happen, I had a really great day. When those don't happen, those are like my non-negotiables. If they become my expendables, then I start to have problems, and that's and I fight for it because I believe in it. Yeah. So hopefully that was a solid answer.
I love that, because when you're doing it, when those non-negotiables are non-negotiables, then you're living fit. But when they become expendables, then you're not living fit. It's pretty black and white. Love it. Like I said at the beginning, Martin Rooney's going to throw some handles on it. You're going to be able to practically apply it immediately. Martin, this has been an absolute pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for coming on the Living Fit Show, helping people live fit and doing way more, especially with the coaching and the culture. And if you haven't already done so, I don't know why you're still listening. Get on Amazon and get these 2 dang books on your bookshelf now.